The checklist is an important part of the shipboard's documentation. The use of the ECDIS isn't an exception for checklist system on board. Let's overview the chapters of the checklist for the ECDIS. The ECDIS familiarization checklist is a very useful instrument for correctly operating the equipment, ensuring that no items to do are missing. As a part of the generic ECDIS course, here the minimum list of familiarization information is provided for your attention. The proposed checklist has 6 main categories to overview. We will go into detail for each category. The familiarization checklist starts normally from the initial preparation of the ECDIS. The initial preparation category consists from the next items. We have to establish if the ECDIS is approved for navigation. We have to establish whether there are company navigational procedures concerning the use of the equipment and ensure that these are followed. Establish whether any passwords are needed for the management of the system, and if so, obtain the details from the master. Establish whether there is an onboard approved familiarization training package for the equipment installed, whether as computer-based training and inbuilt training mode, or as a book or digital image of a book as PDF file is. Use this before completing the checklist items here. Also, you have to identify the primary ECDIS equipment and the facilities for backup. If the backup is a second ECDIS of a different type to that of the primary installation, the familiarization checklist must be repeated for both systems. Officer on the watch must understand ship procedures in event that ECDIS and its backup fail. He needs to determine where the user manuals for ECDIS and its backup are located. An electronic version of this may be available on each unit in PDF format, for instance. Navigator needs to determine where base and update CDs are stored on the ship, if such kind of services are applicable in your case. Also determine the procedure to obtain additional chart permits. We have to determine and understand the position fixed system that fits the ECDIS. Determine the methods of switching between sources, such as primary and secondary position fixed systems. Determine what other systems fit into the ECDIS, such as radar, acquired targets, radar picture overlay, AIS, water speed logs, echo sounders, etc. For each, establish the reference framework. Determine where to find maintenance records related to the ECDIS and service reports, non-conformity reports and inspections, validation reports, and so on, if appropriate for your situation. Determine the power supply modes and their specifications, such as UPS, duration, and other source of energy. Category number 2 in your checklist probably will be the basic operation of the system. Here we have to determine how to switch the ECDIS on and off. We need to establish the functions, position and general operation of the physical controls and switches, including cursor control and the access and selection of menu items. We need to understand how to access the main menu and select menu options. Also, we have to determine the methods for setting day-night viewing modes, brightness contrast, and color correction, if that is available. Probably it will. Also, we have to determine how to switch between traditional and simplified symbology of your display system. We need to determine how to put equipment in route monitoring mode and route planning mode. Also, navigator's officer task is to determine the methods for scrolling and zooming charts, including determining the current scale of displayed charts and settings the display to particular scale. Officer on the watch must be able to determine how to select the display base and standard display of the system. We have to be able to determine how to display other information from ECDIS, including the display of all other information. Also, we need to determine how to check that information concerning ownership, such as dimensions, are correct. We should be able to determine how to select the safety contour and safety depths of our electronic chart. We need to understand how to determine how to select 2 or 4 shades color palette of your system. Determine how to select deep and shallow area display options. We must be able to determine how to set all other parameters concerning the safety domain. We need to know how to establish alarms and other alerts which are given by the ECDIS, and we have to understand the procedure needed to acknowledge them. Category number 3 of our checklist concerns to charts. We must know how to determine access the chart directory and to identify where the charts are in ECDIS, RNCs or unofficial. Navigators are required to determine how to select a chart for display on the screen. We should be able to determine how to load new chart license keys if that is applicable for your system. We should be able to determine how to load base data in your ECDIS equipment. We need to familiarize how to determine and how to check the update status of loaded charts. It is required to determine how to update charts using the normal cumulative update procedures. Also, we should be able to determine how to apply non-cumulative or electronically transmitted updates to your chart. We should know how to determine and apply manual updates if that required to your system. The category number 4 of your onboard familiarization checklist for the ECDIS is navigation tools and functions. Here you determine how to display the legend of general information. For example, units for depths and heights, datums, and so on. Also, you determine how to select information about an object, and I'm talking about peak report. You have to find out how to determine zone of confidence or CADZOC information, which can be displayed on your electronic chart. You have to be able to determine how to access the presentation library of your chart system. You might know how to determine what marine information overlays are available and how to access them. And this is about radar overlay and AIS overlay. Also, you have to determine the single operator action needed to remove marine information overlays from the display. You have to be able to determine the single operator action needed to set the standard display settings. Normally it could be done in one-click access. Determine how to view and edit and delete mariner's notes. You have to know how to determine access to all navigational elements and parameters such as path track, vectors, position lines, etc. Navigator needs to know how to establish the facilities provided for the measurement of the range bearing like EBL and VRM, and should be able to determine their use. Also, we need to determine the methods used for inserting parallel index lines. We have a need to be able to determine what other navigational tools are available and how to access them. We have to be able to determine how to change to using the ECDIS backup system. We should know how to determine the procedure for identifying and reacting to sensors or GNSS failures. We have to determine how to switch chart text or charted objects. We should know how to on and off them. In category number 5 of the familiarization ECDIS checklist, we have route planning issues, if that connected with your watchkeeping responsibilities, of course. Here you have to know how to determine and how to load existing routes and enable for editing them. Officer on the watch in that category needs to determine how to initiate a new route plan. Also, navigator should be able to determine how to initiate and plan alternative routes. Here you need to determine how to save route plan. Also, you need to know how to determine and how to add, delete and adjust graphically the position of the waypoints. At this chapter, also you have to know how to determine how to add, edit and delete critical points. Mariner should be able to determine how to display time varying objects relevant for the timing of the planned voyage. You have to be able to establish all the features available for planning routes, such as use of straight and curved segments, wheel over points, turn radius, and assorting pilotage aids. Also, you need to determine the ship's procedures for displaying MCI, TNP notices, and other relevant notes to the voyage plan. Navigator needs to determine how to use the facilities for checking the planned route. One task more is to determine how to load the planned route and alternatives into the backup system. At this chapter of your familiarization checklist, if you're available, you have to determine how to use ECDIS mode where ECDIS are not available and as appropriate. In chapter 6 of your ECDIS familiarization checklist, you have a route monitoring issue. Here you have to determine how to load a pre-planned route. One more task is how to determine how to select the primary of an alternative route and how to distinguish between them on the display. You must be able to determine the single operator action, then selects the charted display of open ship's position. One more issue is to determine the available display orientation modes and how to switch between them. As example, nose up, head up, course up. You must be able to determine the available display motion modes and how to select them and change the parameters such as position of open ship on your display when relative motion is selected. In case if radar or AIS targets can be displayed on the ECDIS, determine what target vector modes are available and how to switch between and differentiate them. Here also you should be able to determine how to create time labels along the ship's track. One of your tasks also is to establish familiarity with the route monitoring display, including the display of position, heading, course, speed and time. Navigator must be able to determine how to set the length of ship's vectors and intermediate time marks. One more important step is to determine how to display radar and IS MIOs if available. Marine information overlays, Also, navigator needs to know how to determine use of the ECDIS as the input to a track keeping autopilot. This will also need a reference to the autopilot handbook. You need to be skilled to determine how to input LOP to form the reference for an estimated position, line of positioning. You should be familiar how to determine and configure the ECDIS to use a reference for subsequent estimating line of positioning. You should be able to determine how to switch to dead reckoning mode and to identify when the ECDIS is in DR mode. Officer on the watch must be able to determine how to use the review facilities of the voyage recorder. And couple of notes in the end. Companies are responsible for ensuring watchkeepers adequately demonstrate knowledge of all identified issues to comply with the familiarization requirements of the ISM code. You can follow this checklist as a recommended reference for establishing the minimum of ECDIS familiarization tasks on board of your vessel in your company. Some tasks in the checklist might not pertain to navigation at the operational level, but raise the navigation at the management level as defined by STCW 2010. Thanks for watching this on Q&A. Good luck!